We're extremely blessed this morning to have Dr. Smith with us. So Dr. Janet Smith, welcome. You want to move this here?
Thank you. Good morning. It's great to be here. An unbelievable turnout, an unbelievable day, given what happened yesterday. I'd like to thank especially the organizers, because I know how hard it is to put together something like this. We show up and we get all this fanfare, but it's really the people that put the work into it that deserve the congratulations. Sometimes you don't know what you're going to have to do as an organizer. This morning, I was getting ready. I didn't have something that holds my earring on, and I can't speak without earrings. I've tried once and it didn't work, and so I had to call Carrie early this morning to have her bring me something to keep my earrings on. So now I feel better. I think I can do this. I'm sorry for this first slide. It is a sacred space, and I didn't know exactly where the venue was, but I'm most known for my talk, Contraception, Why Not? And this is going to be a combination of that talk and a talk on conscience. Years ago, when I started giving my talk on contraception, why not, I was at an event where one of my 8-year-old godsons was attending, and he told me, he said, and there's also a video version of this, he said, you know, when I miss you, Godmama Janet, he said, I watch your video. He says, I think it's called Contractions, Why Not? Now, he was 8 years old, oldest of 5, so he knew what contractions, 5 minutes apart mean and 2 minutes apart mean. So it wasn't such a confusion. And then a couple years later, I was in Trinidad giving a talk at a national conference, and I was asked about a problem in Trinidad. I was asked if I thought rapists should be castrated. And my knees kind of buckled, and I said, gee, it's obviously a terrible crime, deserves a severe penalty, but I just don't know. I said, I hear there are drugs that can be used to control the sexual desire. Maybe that should be considered. So I'm leaving Trinidad the next day, and I'm buying a national newspaper, and I see the headlines, and the headlines say, castrate rapists. Drugs can be used to reduce their sex drive, says U.S. professor. So my knees buckled again, and I said, I sure hope there's some other U.S. professor in Trinidad this weekend. I know this isn't appropriate for a sacred space. My apologies, okay. So this talk is going to have a little bit of conscience, why not, in it. And this is what we do if we don't have this is who we are if we don't have a well-formed conscience. I let my conscience be my guide, and it turned out to be a sociopath, all right? So we have to have a proper understanding of what the conscience is. And we're speaking about it in respect to all issues, but particularly in respect to Humanae Vitae, which, as you know, came out in 1968. Yeah, last year was the 50th year anniversary of Humanae Vitae. And upon its publication, one of the very first things that happened was a young moral theologian at Catholic University of America, Father Charles Curran, held a press conference on the steps of CUA and said that Catholics did not have to follow the teaching of Humanae Vitae, that it was based on an inadequate understanding of natural law, and that we could follow our consciences in respect to the teaching. And I started calling this, after all, the conscience clause, which it would appear in all these textbooks on Catholic sexuality, that you needed to follow your conscience on these issues. They didn't say the same thing in respect to race relations or immigration or anything else. It was always in respect to the sexual issues that you had to follow your conscience, which seemed to be kind of, you could disobey this if your conscience told you to. John Henry Newman had one of the best statements on conscience, many statements. It's from a document. He says, when they advocate the rights of conscience, many people, they in no sense mean the rights of the creature, but the right of thinking, speaking, writing, and acting according to their judgment or their humor, without any thought of God at all. So a lot of people think that when he says it, they don't mean the rights of the creature. The creature means that we're made by God. So if we would be something we'd be doing in reference to God. But most people think conscience means, it seemed that Father Curran to some extent meant, that we can act in accord with our own view of things rather than with view of the church or God. So a lot of people think, once you hear it, just act in accord with your conscience. People say, well, that means I can do whatever I want. And that's certainly not the church's teaching, that conscience means that now if the church doesn't say I have to do this, that means that I can do whatever I want. This is the definition of conscience given in Vatican II. Man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. Man has in his heart a law inscribed by God. For instance, we know that murder is wrong, and we know we didn't make that up, all right? We know that's not something that I decided that murder was wrong. I know that murder is wrong because God has written it in my heart. It says, man's dignity lies in observing this law, and by it he will be judged. This is something really to ponder, that our dignity resides in the fact that we have a conscience. And that means that we can know the truth. We can know what is true, and once we know that something is true, the truth has a demand on us. We know that. If somebody says you're arguing about something and, I owe you, no, you think I owe you $10, I don't, and then it turns out it's true that I owe you $10, then I owe you $10. It makes a demand upon us, all right? So when we understand that something is true, it's like, wow, once that's true, I know that it pulls me, and if I don't act in accord with it, there's something wrong about me if I don't act in accord with the truth. Again, animals, etc., they can't know the truth, and they can't act in accord or act against the truth. But human beings can. That's where our dignity lies. It goes on to say, man's conscience is man's most secret core and his sanctuary. There he is alone with God, whose voice echoes in his depths. It's a beautiful thing to think that we have within us this secret core and a sanctuary where we can talk with God, right? So acting according to our conscience doesn't mean what I think I should do, what I think is right or wrong, what I would feel comfortable with, what wouldn't make me feel too guilty. But when I consult my conscience, what I'm really asking is, what does God want me to do in this instance? What does God think about this particular issue? Right? So I want to ask what God, I'll tell you a secret. It's taken me most of my life to figure this out. God's will is always better than yours. All right? All right? Always. And if there's tension between you and God, you think God wants me to do this, but I want to do that, you should be praying that God wins. All right? I mean, most of our prayer, at least my prayer, most of my life has been trying to get God to do my will. All right? And it's only with some beating up by life that I realize that it's much better if God's will is done rather than mine. All right? So my prayer now should be, God, please help me do your will, rather than, God, will you please give me this that I want or that I want? You could, if you wanted to. Why don't you want to? If you loved me, you would, all right? That's been the prayer of most of my life. I've gotten a little better. All right, so a great place to look for the foundations of any truth is the Catechism. People, if you haven't read the Catechism, read the Catechism. There's all sorts of guides to reading the Catechism over the course of a year or ever, and you will find such riches there, it will stun you, all right? So we're told about the conscience there. Moral conscience, present at the heart of a person, our very core, enjoins him at the appropriate moment to do good and avoid evil. It also judges particular choices, approving those that are good and denouncing those that are evil. It bears witness to the authority of truth in reference to the supreme good to which the human person is drawn, and it welcomes the commandments. Right? The conscience says, great, God told us the 10 Commandments. What a great thing. Again, it's the owner's manual. All right? If you're confused, there you go. And it says, when he listens to his conscience, the prudent man, again, can hear God speaking. Of course, it's a problem that we have a lot of voices in our inner being. We have the voice of our culture that tells us something. We have the voice of our passions. We have the voice of our peer group. We have the voice of the media and the government and our parents, right? So trying to figure out God's voice it's a skill that's acquired, and it's acquired through prayer, right? You have to pray a lot. And the more you pray, at a certain point, you say, oh, God's telling me to do this. And it's not like it's a voice, like a high-pitched or a low voice. It's a certain kind of knowledge that you have all of a sudden, and you say, that's what I'm supposed to do. God is wanting me to do that. It doesn't always come in prayer. It can come at other times, but it's the result of prayer. It's the result of prayer where you have spent time trying to empty yourself out and letting God speak to you. So if you're confused about what to do, I often tell people who call me up and ask me about a question, a moral dilemma, I say, go sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament and just ask Jesus what he thinks, right, what he wants of you. For instance, young people who are cohabiting, who are convinced it's right. I say, why don't you go sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament and ask Jesus if he thinks what you're doing is right? And do you know what happens? They won't go. All right? And you know why they won't go? Because they know what he'll say. All right? And they don't want to hear it. We call that, in a minute we'll talk about, that's willful ignorance. But I've had other people who have asked me about different things using IVF or things like that, and I say, go in front of the Blessed Sacrament. And they run there, right? Because they want to know, right? And they'll read the church's document, they'll read some other things, and I said, then just sit there and just let God talk to you. And they come out invariably with the right answer. I said, what do you think Jesus said to you? And they'll tell me. I said, I think that's right. It seems right to me. And it's not me, it's the church's teaching that I'm judging it against. So, although each individual has a right to be respected in his own journey in search of the truth, there exists a prior moral obligation, and a grave one at that, to seek the truth and to adhere to it once it is known. And we live in a culture that says everyone has a right to his own opinion. I have a right to my own opinion. And I would say, I don't know about that. I mean, yeah, you do, but you don't have a right to claim it's true, right? You have to seek the truth. You have to make certain that your opinions line up with the truth. The first obligation we have is to seek the truth and then to adhere to it once it is known. As Cardinal John Henry Newman, that outstanding defender of the rights of conscience, forcefully put it, conscience has rights because it has duties. So when we talk about, the law having to respect the consciences of people, we're not saying just they're any old opinion or any old thing that they want to do. We're saying that they've gone through a process where they believe that God really commands them, say, not to work on Sunday, right? That's God's command. And we say we respect that because that's God speaking to your conscience, and that's plausible to us about what we know about God. He might, in fact, require such a thing. So we have to respect conscience, but only because it has duties. It can't be, I go in and out of this to get, again, what I want. Now, there's certain kinds of ignorance that will bear upon how culpable you are for your actions. One is called vincible ignorance, and vincible means that something can be overcome. Ignorance that it doesn't have to be, all right? It says this ignorance, vincible ignorance, can often be imputed to personal responsibility. I mean, you're responsible. It might be, say, ignorance for which you are responsible. This is the case when a man takes little trouble to find out what is true and good, or when conscience is by degrees almost blinded through the habit of committing sin. In such cases, the person is culpable for the evil he commits. So even if you're ignorant of the law, the question is, why are you ignorant? Are you ignorant about contraception being wrong? Why? Is it because you took little trouble to find out what's true and good? Is that why? Or is it these young people that I say, go sit in front of the Blessed Sacrament to see and pray about whether cohabitation is right? Well, it's the habit of committing sin. They don't want to know. Their conscience is being blinded. They don't want to know. I mean, minor things. I mean, I don't know how long it's been since I've stepped on a scale and looked at the number. When I go to the doctor's office, I put my back to the scale. See, I don't want to know, all right? I am culpable for what's happening here, all right? But that's the way we often are. We don't want to look at reality, because if we looked at reality, then we'd have to change. And we don't have to change. People often marry people, even though everybody is around them saying, don't you see who he is or who she is? Can't you see? And they say, oh, no, I see things that nobody else sees, which sometimes is true. And sometimes you're just seeing what you want to see, and you're not seeing what's there. So this is a kind of deniability. When we talk about neglectful ignorance, this is a doctor who's going off to play golf, and he's writing a prescription for a patient, but he hasn't bothered to read the chart. And he just might be prescribing something for the patient which might make the patient very sick or kill him. That will get you in a lot of trouble with the law if you don't do due diligence about learning what you need to know in order to make a good decision. So again, a Catholic who is thinking about contraception, I mean, unfortunately, most Catholics have been taught nothing about contraception, nothing. Never heard it preached at church, never heard an explanation. They might have heard on the national news that whoever, Pope Francis, is against contraception and talking about it in some overpopulated country, and isn't the Catholic Church just awful? And so Catholics know that the church teaches that contraception is wrong, but they think that it can't be very wrong because they never hear it preached from the pulpit. And if it is, maybe it's going to change soon. That's what Charles Curran said. So you don't have to obey it, it's going to change. The church will eventually change its teaching. So Catholics have not been well instructed on this. I think for some Catholics there is what we're going to call an invincible ignorance. But for others there's neglect. I think how many of us have college degrees, right? And how many of us have used those college degrees to read the catechism or encyclicals? We read People magazine or Sports Illustrated or our Twitter feed constantly. You want to say, am I really using the education that I'm privileged to have in this world? Am I reading the things that will form my heart and soul and help me become a better Catholic? Now, these are listed as some of the sources of ignorance. Think of us. Ignorance of Christ and his gospel. Again, how many of us are reading the Bible every day? And if not, why not, right? We can all own one. We can own a beautiful one. We can own one that has the print size that works for our eyes, right? We can have the color, that we can have the leather or paper, whatever we want, right? Get a Bible, read it. Bad example given by others, right? Don't be a bad example to others. Be a good example, right? And, not just live a good life, but talk about it. Say why I made the choices I made. I'm not condemning you. I'm not judging you, but I want to let you know why I think it's important to read this for myself. Enslavement to one's passions. That would be me on the scale, all right? It's food I like that maybe I wouldn't eat if I knew the facts, all right? Assertion of a mistaken notion of autonomy of conscience, that somehow I have the right to make my own decision about various things. Rejection of the church's authority and her teaching. Rejection of the church's authority and her teaching. I remember one priest was on a retreat, and this woman was there, and in confessional, he was talking, or might have talked about contraception in one of the lectures. And in the confessional, she said she would never accept the church's teaching. She didn't believe it. She, it was her right not to believe it. And he gave her a copy of my tape at the time. And she came back 3 hours later and says, I need to go to confession about contraception, because that's the first time she had heard anything. But she had already made up her mind, all right? She was rejecting the authority of the church. Again, a lack of conversion in charity, thinking you can just go to church on Sunday and get the sacrament and you've done your job by God and the rest of the week is your own time. As opposed to, when your feet hit the floor in the morning, it's how can I live as a good Christian today? How can I be Christ on the face of the earth today? And he says these can be at the source of errors of judgment and moral conduct. We've already talked about willed ignorance and my personal relationship with a scale, which is probably overdone already. But this is a man who is, he's saying to his wife, I'll be home from the party at 11, and it's near midnight, and he's still having a drink and not looking at the clock because he doesn't want to know. But there is something called invincible ignorance, ignorance for which you are not responsible. You could not have known the facts. And in our culture, sometimes it really is true. Again, you never hear from the pulpit that contraception is wrong. You never hear that cohabitation is wrong. Well over, somewhere around 85% of Catholics cohabit before marriage. Everybody around them has. Their brothers and sisters have. Their parents don't even disapprove. So how culpable are they for doing that? I don't know. But it says if it's invincible, if on the contrary the ignorance is invincible, or the moral subject is not responsible for his erroneous judgment, the evil committed by the person cannot be imputed to him. It remains no less an evil, a privation, a disorder. One must therefore work to correct the errors of moral conscience. Meaning just because you don't know it's wrong doesn't mean that it is wrong. It doesn't mean that you won't suffer from it. It's almost like drinking poison in your orange juice. You know, you don't know it's there, but you keep drinking that poison in your orange juice, and before long you're going to get darn sick. And so people who cohabit before marriage and might not know that it's wrong, they're still going to suffer from that action. They're still going to have a bad impact on their relationship and their future, one hopes, their future marriage. So we have to form our conscience. It says conscience must be informed and moral judgment enlightened. A well-formed conscience is upright and truthful. It formulates its judgments according to reason, in conformity with the true good willed by the wisdom of the Creator. First and foremost, we have to think. It's a rare parent who hasn't had a child do something that was so stupid that the parent goes, "What were you thinking?" Right? Why weren't you thinking? If you only were thinking, you wouldn't have done that. Right? So the first thing is to think. Again, just myself as an example. I put a bunch of chocolates in front of me. I'm not doing much thinking. All right? I'm just, if I thought, I wouldn't be getting that out of the way. All right? You got to think. Right? Especially for staying out of temptation. Right? You say, well, if I go to an all-eat buffet, that's not a good choice for me. Right? It's a good choice to split a meal with somebody else. That's a good choice. Think. Right? So God gave us, first and foremost, our intellects, our ability to think. Right? The education of the conscience is indispensable for human beings who are subject to negative influence and tempted by sin to prefer their own judgment and to reject authoritative teachings. And we're given some guidance. In the formation of conscience, the Word of God is the light for our path. We must assimilate it in faith and prayer and put it into practice. Again, read the scriptures, get to know Jesus so that you really know. You say, no, he wouldn't want me to do this. All right? And get to know the Holy Spirit and God the Father. You say, be close to them and they will be guiding you. Right? We must also examine our conscience before the Lord's cross. You think this can be very painful, and a lot of people don't want to do it because you say, oh my, if I sit in front of the cross and I examine my conscience, God is just going to be mad at me, and I don't want to hear that voice. I don't want God scolding me, right? I feel bad enough already, or I don't want to feel more bad, or whatever it is. And one thing my spiritual director told me, he said, that mean voice is not God's voice. God is never mean. He's never scolding, honestly. He's always encouraging. Or you're having trouble with that? Well, I'm glad you came here. All right, I'm going to help you. Or I'm going to show you something about yourself you don't know, but I just want you to know you're making progress, and I'm glad you're here, and we're going to do better. It's the voice of a loving father, not a father that beats you down and yells at you and makes you feel bad about yourself. He's always going to be saying, so glad to see you. So glad you're here. So glad we're talking. Let me help. All right? So examine your conscience. And the examine of conscience, especially, at the end of a day, the word really is examine, not an examination in a sense. Again, you're not supposed to be tracing out everything you did bad during the day, beat yourself down. You're supposed to be asking yourself, how was I close to God during this day? How could I sense God's presence? Where was God in my life today? When was I not being aware of God's presence? And how can I sharpen my awareness? Yeah, and there may be times that I failed, and that's because I wasn't really remembering that I'm being guided by the Holy Spirit at all times. So it's not meant to be something that, again, makes you feel totally miserable about yourself, but something that makes you be closer and closer to God. So it says we are assisted by the gifts of the Holy Spirit, aided by the witness or advice of others, and guided by the authoritative teaching of the church. Now that's the one we're going to pay some attention to here, but all of these other things, the advice of others, you having trouble with something, call up a wise, holy person and ask them. Ask them what they would think you would do. If you're having trouble how to discipline your kids, find someone you think was a good parent. Say, what do I do? Am I being too harsh? Am I being too easy? What am I doing? Ask for advice. Right? And guided by authoritative teaching of the church. I mean, this is one of the great selling points, if you will, of the Catholic Church. is we have a church that teaches us about these things. You know, the Methodists just got together to vote on same-sex marriages, whether they're moral or immoral. Say, morality is not established by majority vote, right? It's not how it's done. We have a church that's guided by the Holy Spirit. And we got tensions in our church, there's no question about it. And you have to know the difference between sort of the church, the bride of Christ, and then the church that's run by human beings. There can be a huge disparity between what the bride of Christ wants and what we human beings are doing. But we have a church that has the most beautiful teachings, and as you and intelligible teachings. You read them and you start to get the reasons behind these, and all you say, "Oh my goodness, this isn't just something that's made up in some arbitrary thing." There's real depth and wisdom behind these things, and I believe that that's true of Humanae Vitae. That if people are puzzled about contraception, they just shouldn't be doing whatever they want. But the first thing they should do is read Humanae Vitae, short document, 35 pages. Right? Read my translation. It's way better than the other ones. I'm always putting time on purgatory every time I open my mouth. All right. Again, ours is a hostile culture. We can't, sometimes you can draw upon your culture to help you be good. In fact, I think to a great extent, sometimes my parents were that way. They were both children of immigrants who came from traditional cultures, and those cultures tried, they tried to, my mother's parents had very little education. My grandmother only had 2 years of education. I don't know if my grandfather graduated from high school, but they had very profound, deep values, and my parents inherited those. And they weren't prepared for what happened to their children when we went off to college. They were both the first in their family to go to college. And they went to a college where, there was rules at the dorms. You couldn't have men in the dorms or women in the dorms after a certain time at night. And there was all sorts of, drinking rules and all sorts of things. And they came out of college pretty unscathed, right, as far as their morality is concerned. They sent us off to college, had no idea they were sending us into an absolute den of iniquity. Where the first thing you're being told about is where to get your contraceptives and what to do if you have a drug overdose. And, every morning class might be canceled because someone's protesting the Vietnam War or something. My parents had no idea that's what they were sending us off to. They thought they were sending us off to the same kind of college that we went to. And then when we come home, they didn't know who we were anymore. I remember one of my brothers, my oldest brother, he went to Georgetown. And when he took a bus from Georgetown to Pennsylvania, and my father had to drive about 45 minutes to go pick him up. And he saw this young man standing outside of the bus station with a leather jacket with fringes and a big hat and a slovenly beard and slovenly clothes. And my dad said, is that my son? And he said he drove 3 times around the bus station trying to decide whether he'd pick him up or not. Right? My dad was a very mischievous person, and when he retired, what he did was he grew a very scruffy goatee. He had some phony earring piercings in his ear. He hated the Izod alligators. He thought that was so ridiculous, so he had like 7 of them on a shirt. My mother put them on a shirt, and then he had his name, J.J. Smith, embroidered on the back of some sloppy jeans. And he made all of us go introduce him to our bosses looking like that. Because he said, I spent years being embarrassed by you. He said, and you just wonder how many years he was planning that. When I came back from college, I had long, straggly hair and little wire-rim glasses, and I was wearing some jacket. It wasn't a leather jacket, but that would be, couldn't afford it then, but it was some shiny nylon jacket. It looked like a leather jacket. One of the neighbor women, Grandma Rapp, I called her Grandma Rapp. Grandma Rapp said, now, Janet, I know you're a really nice girl, but when we're downtown and you're walking around, don't recognize me. It's basically like, I just look like, she doesn't want to know, she didn't want people to know that she knew people that looked like that, all right? So that was the split in the world. And my parents lived a very good life because they had the support of the culture and everybody up and down the street. My parents could send us out in the morning and not have the slightest worry about where we were, what we were doing, or who we were with, because everybody on the street shared the same values. And they couldn't find us, they start calling around. Where are they? I thought they were over there. No, they're over here. Come on home, you're supposed to tell me where you are. But it wasn't a crisis because you knew that wherever they are, there were the adults that had the same values as you that could trust you. No longer true. Our media and entertainment promote radical hedonism and worse. I mean, when I was young, there was always only family entertainment, until about, 11 o'clock at night. And you couldn't watch there wouldn't be commercials or anything that would corrupt a child. You could let the child turn on TV and watch anything at that time. You had no concerns. Now, they can't watch any commercial for any statement, right? We no longer believe in heroes. We're very cynical. If you ever look at the literature your kids are reading in high school, you go crazy. They're meant to turn kids into just real cynics that nobody can be trusted. There's no ideals. Nobody could ever act for a noble motive. Nobody could ever be self-sacrificing. And that's the kind of literature they're reading. Again, we have a relativistic culture. There's no right and wrong. You are allowed to do whatever you want, and let me do whatever I want. Which is the false view of freedom. Again, parents are unprepared to provide guidance to their children. They say ridiculous things, like I will let them, so my children can be religious, but I'll let them choose when they're adults. How many children have ever chosen to be religious when they haven't been trained up? You train them up, they have something to reject. But you don't train them up, it takes them forever. Some do. I mean, God's always chasing after us, and some people respond to that. But it's just that much harder. Years ago when I gave one of my talks, afterwards, this woman said to me, she said, my conscience is not at all bothered by contraception. And I said, and I tried to be respectful, and I could get a little sarcastic sometimes. And I said, that puzzles me. I said, because the conscience is the inner sanctuary. It's where God speaks to you within. So what you're telling me is that the Holy Spirit has spoken to you and told you that contraception is okay. But John Paul II, who prays about 8 hours every day, I said, for some reason, the Holy Spirit hasn't gotten to him. I said, how likely is it that the Holy Spirit got to you and not John Paul II? And to give her credit, she came up afterwards and she said, I just never really thought about it like that. She'd never thought about it like that. So now I'm going to talk not so much about conscience, but about the truths of Humanae Vitae and the various ways, again, that the conscience should be working through this issue. One is everybody needs to know the facts about everything, right? And my tape, Contraception Cracking the Myth, gives you a lot of facts. I'll give you some of those facts today. It's available on the website Lighthouse Catholic Media should you want a CD or an MP3 download. But when we're thinking again, acting in accord with reason, we want to ask these questions. How does contraception work? What effect does it have on a woman's physical and psychological health? What effect does it have on relationships? What effect does it have on society? And what effect does it have on a person's relationship with God? And until you've sort of worked these things through, you don't really know what contraception is. It's not just a little pill. It's something that radically changes people's understanding of sexuality and the choices they make about sexuality. Here's some certain interesting facts, right? Oddly, most women don't know this. It's a remarkable thing. Most women don't know how their reproductive system works. Women have 4 fertility hormones, right? 4 of them. And they fluctuate in the course of a month. In the top row there, there are hormones in the body that help a woman ovulate. Women are born with all the eggs we're ever going to have. 200,000, a million. Males have about 4 to 5 million sperm in every ejaculate. Every male could populate China, right? It might explain the energy level, all right, between males and females in a certain sense. They're fertile from the time they hit puberty until they die. We have a limited window of fertility. But every woman releases an egg every month, right? Releases and ripens one of those eggs every month. If sometimes twins, she'll do 2, triplets 3, but generally 1 egg a month, right? And you'll see around day 14 of a woman's cycle, there's this peak of hormones in her system. And if she gets pregnant, something else will be happening. If she doesn't get pregnant, you'll see that those hormones go way down because they've served their purpose. She's ovulated. If she doesn't get pregnant, the little egg eventually just dies. In fact, it lives. That egg lives in her body for only, it can be fertilized for only, it can be fertilized for only it lives for 24 hours maturely and can be fertilized for only 12 hours a month. So a woman can only get pregnant 12 hours every month. Think about that. Why are we taking pills day after day, month after month, year after year, not to get pregnant when there's only 12 hours a month? A little more complicated than that, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So then you'll notice, so the second row is the egg ripening, not getting pregnant, and then just dying off. Then we have another set of hormones that surge again. You'll see pretty much surge at the same time of the month. And then these are the hormones that build up the endometrium in a woman's uterus that is the resting place for a new little human being to come down the fallopian tubes and implant in the uterine wall. We're building up a nice bloody surface every month that's meant to be the source of oxygen and nutrition for a baby as it stays there for 9 months. Right, you'll notice it peaks again. Then you'll notice it peaks later towards the end of it drops. I should say it has a severe drop. But you'll notice the fourth row is that building up of the endometrium that's going to be the support system for a new little human being. Now you'll notice that women have this incredible, we're not the same person every day. We have a different chemical makeup every day. Yeah, I see you laughing. Yeah. You have to know this. You have to know that women are chemically a different person every day of the month, right? And honestly, sometimes we're the sweetest person on the face of the earth, and other times not so much. And we don't know who we are any day of the month until we talk to a male. And somehow that reveals to us whether they're the sweetest person on the face of the earth or not so much. And males, their hormones in a month, fluctuation is like this. All right? So if he seems the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, he is. And if she seems vacillating, and who the heck is this that I married? I had a friend who every month, she and her husband would have this just rollicking fight. And she'd be mad at him for something. And she'd say, Dennis, you're just a jerk, and I don't know why I married you. And she said, Jane, 3 weeks of every month I'm adorable and you love me and you can't believe you were so lucky to find me. And the other week of the month I'm a jerk. And he said, I'm going to mark it on the calendar. We're going to have this same conversation in a month from now. All right? It helped them both a great deal figure out what was going on in the marriage. But what's interesting about this is the chemical contraceptives put in a woman's body synthetic forms of the hormones that she has in her body when she's pregnant, right? Puts in her body synthetic forms of the hormones that are in her body when she's pregnant. And what those hormones do is they make the woman's body think it's pregnant, right? So it suppresses ovulation. So this peaking and valleying doesn't happen, all right? A woman is in a state of pseudo-pregnancy, all right? She doesn't have the normal flow of hormones in her bodies. And those hormones are very valuable for women, right? And she's suppressing her fertility and her natural working of her body by using chemicals, right? So one way, again, that the hormonal contraceptive works is by stopping ovulation. But these same hormones that ripen and release the eggs are the same hormones that produce what's called a fertile mucus in a woman's system. And that mucus helps carry the sperm to meet the egg, right? So if a woman is using a hormonal contraceptive, she's not producing that kind of fertile mucus that helps carry the sperm to meet the egg. So when she's having intercourse, in fact, sometimes women 2 to 10% of the time for most hormonal contraceptives still ovulate. They ovulate even though they're using a contraceptive because their body wants to ovulate. A healthy woman's body wants to ovulate. But if she's using chemical contraceptives, it's trying to tap down those natural hormones But sometimes, maybe she's taking other medications that interfere with the pill, or her health is not so good, something. Her own hormones are very powerful, right? But she still might get pregnant because she doesn't have enough mucus to carry the sperm to meet the egg. And sometimes that nice endometrium doesn't build up, because if a woman's pregnant, pseudo-pregnancy, she's not going to be building up a nice endometrium. So should she get pregnant on the pill, which a lot of women do, all right, that new little human being comes and tries to implant in the uterine wall, but it's a thin uterine wall because it hasn't had the rich hormones that build up a nice thick wall. So she may be sloughing off a new human being from her womb. She may be miscarrying, they call it, but really it's self-aborting in this instance, where she's used, this is what they call the abortifacient aspect of the pill. It won't provide, it prevents there being this hospitable place for the new little human being. So this is, we were there, right? Now we're here. All right. This is a simple chart that's used in third world countries to explain natural family planning to couples. And it's assuming that every woman has a 28-day cycle, but few women reliably have a 28-day cycle. But this can be used, it doesn't matter how many days you have. You can have 21 days one month and 37 days the next month, and you still can use natural family planning. What we'll see at the top row there is sunshine and then rain and then sunshine. And the sunshine means that there's the dryness. There's not that fertile mucus present, all right? So a woman can learn how to sense in her system, observe in her system, whether or not there's fertile mucus. Then that fertile mucus appears. That's the rainy part. And that's the portion of the month when she could get pregnant. And then after the egg comes and goes, she has more dry days, 12 generally, 12 dry days. So there's two periods of the month, 2 phases of every month, where a woman can have sexual intercourse and cannot possibly get pregnant in those dry days, all right? What we're seeing on the bottom row is you have 4 red days, which is the bleeding that a woman does at the beginning of every month because she's sloughing off the endometrium that wasn't used for a new little human being the month before. Every month, a woman's body is preparing to get pregnant, right? And when she bleeds, it's the endometrium means that she didn't get pregnant. Then she has about 6 or 7 days of her body is resting. It needs some rest after that bleeding, right? And then these fertile hormones kick in. And the reason we have all those little people, though, those little babies that might appear at that time. Now you say, well, why are there 7 or 8 of them there? What if you can get pregnant only 12 hours every month? Well, the point is this fertile mucus can keep a sperm alive for up to 5 days. So if a woman has sexual intercourse on Monday, but not Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and has sexual intercourse on Friday, she might get pregnant from that excess sexual intercourse she had on Monday because the mucus helped keep the sperm alive. It rarely happens. It's only 3% of the time that happens. And actually, if she has intercourse on the day that she ovulates, she only has like a 43% chance of getting pregnant, right? If she doesn't get pregnant, again, that egg dies, and then the rest of the month, there's no more mucus, there's no more egg. She can't possibly get pregnant. And there's various ways that women can know other signs of their fertility. One is this presence of the fertile mucus. Another is at the time a woman ovulates, her temperature goes up a little bit for the rest of the month. So once she sees a temperature rise and she observes this happen for several days, then she can know that she has ovulated and the egg has come and the egg is gone. There's also a change in her cervix that a woman can learn to detect. And now there's various ovulation monitors and even things that women can wear on their wrists that can let them know where they are in their cycle. It's a remarkable thing what technology is telling us. So if a couple decides, we're talking here married couples, we hope, that it's not a good idea for them to have a child right now, then they should not be having sexual intercourse during that fertile time, right? God has said that's the time of the month where I understand your act of sexual intercourse to be an invitation to me to create a new human soul. Because God creates each and every human soul, right? The male provides the sperm, the woman provides the egg, but God provides the soul. So if you're having sexual intercourse during that fertile time of the month, you're essentially, with your bodies, inviting God to create a new human soul. But for some people, there are times when it's not a good idea to have another child. In fact, God agrees. I hope you're praying about that. and asking God, again, God, do you think we're right? Is it not a good idea for us to have another child right now? We're going to use natural family planning. And so we're not going to have sex during that time because we don't feel it's right to invite a new baby into our family at this time. But we will confine. God said, have sex all month long. That's fine with me. It's a good thing. He said, but during these days, that's a particular invitation for me to create a new human being. It's a beautiful thing. We'll talk about that more towards the end. But the act of sexual intercourse is basically an invitation to God during the fertile time to create a new human soul. God made sex for two purposes. One is that two should become one. Scripture says, first thing. So let's say about Adam, said it's not good that he should be alone. It's not good that he should be alone. So he creates Eve. He says, and what does Adam do? He says, here at last, it's bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. I've seen enough of those elephants and tigers and everything. I want something for me. And look what he got, all right? Bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh, someone I can relate with. And then what does God say? He says, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. That's his commandment. It's the very nature of love to overflow. God's a lover. God made the whole universe out of love. It's part of his nature. And he wants man and wife to be made in his image. He wants them to be unconditional lovers, like he's an unconditional lover, to each other, affirm them. I mean, Adam, affirming, here she is. Yeah, wow, look what God made for me. I'm sure Eve's looking at the same, thinking the same thing. I'm not alone. Look, there's someone for me. And we're not alone. There's going to be more of us. And what's more affirming to another human being than to say, I want to spend my whole life with you? You know, I never managed that, right? I'm not a risk taker like that, right? You say, I'm putting my whole happiness in someone else's hands, your whole life. If this doesn't work, it's going to be hard. It's hard anyway. It's hard for two human beings to live together. But you're saying, I'm putting my happiness in your hands. Right? That's an amazing thing. It's not really possible to do without God's grace. With God's grace, it's very possible. Even when it's really, really hard, it's possible. And then it's very natural to say, I want to have sex with you. I want to become one, right? But I want there to be a third, right? I want someone with your eyes and your laugh and your walk, right? I want to raise someone with you. I like your values. I think we could be good parents together. There's almost nothing more affirming to say to a person than I want you to be the father or the mother of my children. It's very possible to say, a lot of people don't. I'd like to have sex with you. Don't, all right? But saying, I want you to be the father of my children. I want you to be the mother of my children. That's a marriage proposal. And that's the biggest compliment you can pay to a person, because it means I want us to be together for the rest of our lives, engaged in this incredibly important activity, which is try to bring this person up to be in God's kingdom forever. All right, we'll talk a little bit more towards the end. All right, what effect does contraception have on a woman's physical health? In short, quick answer, it's bad, right? And if you're going to be using contraceptives, your doctor tells you need them for whatever reason, study up, right? It's very interesting that the secular world is starting to get very aware of the bad side effects of contraception. This is a woman named Holly Gregg Spall, who's written a book called Sweeten the Pill. She took it for 20 years. She took the pill for 20 years. And I don't recall her reason for going off, but she discovered she was a whole different person when she came off the pill, that had completely affected her personality and her life. A lot of side effects, migraines women have. Again, we'll talk about some of these. But she said nobody ever told her what an effect it was having on her. She related, and we'll see why, she related to men entirely differently when she went off the contraceptive pill. She says people don't tell women this, all right? They think it's just like taking an aspirin. It's just a normal thing. People reach a certain age and they go on one of the hormonal contraceptives. Now, some of the common side effects of pills are increased irritability, all right, propensity to depression, weight gain, and a reduced sex drive. Now, I'm guessing every woman in this room would like to be more irritable, more prone to depression, gain weight, and have a reduced sex drive. And I'm quite certain that every man in this room that's associated with a female, right, wants her to be more irritable, more prone to depression, to gain weight, and have a reduced sex drive. Well, we have something that will bring that about, right? That's the hormonal contraceptives. That's what they do. Remember that a woman who is using a hormonal contraceptive is in a state of pseudo-pregnancy. Women who are pregnant usually have a reduced sex drive because evolutionarily speaking, sex has achieved its purpose. She doesn't have as much a desire for sex because she's already pregnant, right? She gains weight because she's going to be having a new little human being, but she's not pregnant, right? So it's a remarkable thing. And look into some of the side effects. This was a big thing a couple years ago. Johnson & Johnson paid $68 million to settle birth control cases. Johnson & Johnson has spent at least $68.7 million to settle hundreds of lawsuits filed by women who suffered blood clots, heart attacks, or strokes after using the company's Ortho-Evra birth control patch. Court records show J&J, the world's largest maker of healthcare products, avoided trials, meaning litigation, through the confidential settlements and hasn't released the financial details to investors. There's all sorts of lawsuits against companies that produce contraception. They pay big money when women die or get ill by using contraceptives. But you remember our government, with the HHS mandate, was mandating that every employer pay for contraceptives, not insulin, not nothing else. Nothing else was mandated except contraception because it's the most important drug that anybody can have, and everyone that wants it should have it paid for and paid for free. And we know, of course, that it cures no illness. You're not ill if you're fertile. That's a healthy condition. It's a healthy condition for an adult female to be fertile. And we're giving her synthetic hormones, chemical hormones, right, to suppress a fertile, healthy functioning of her body. It makes no sense. It's not health care. It makes you unhealthy, literally speaking, right, rather than healthy. But our culture is obsessed with contraception. It's supposed to be the magic pill that somehow solves all of our problems. I say it creates mountains of our problems. Right? There's a huge increase in breast cancer by those who use the hormonal contraceptives. Breast cancer is the second leading cause of death in women. I think heart attack is the first. Contraception is also affiliated with heart problems. Right? A great place to go for all sorts of information about women's health, especially contraception, natural family planning, is a marvelous website called Natural Womanhood. Know your body. So if you're interested in knowing more about the facts of contraception, you want to go to this website, Natural Womanhood. How does it affect relationships? Again, badly. Right? This is a remarkable book written in 1999 called The Decline of Males. I have a whole talk called The Hormones Are Us. And it was written by a anthropologist named Lionel Tiger. My mother's always told me not to make fun of people's names, but it's a little hard here. Lionel Tiger is an anthropologist who studies animal behavior to explain human behavior. And he co-authors books with a man named Robin Fox. No kidding. No kidding. Okay. So one of the many things he knew that the contraception would totally change male-female relationships. He says it has to, because the fertility part of the human relationship is so much a part of it. And he also found out that the hormones are, we've always said for how long, there's a chemical reaction. There's chemical attraction. There'd be a dozen males or female come into a room, and you're not going to be equally attracted to all of them. There's something chemical in that attraction. One just hits you, boing, that one, right? It's chemical, it is hormonal, right? And he discovered that males have a much greater attraction for females when females are in the fertile phase of their cycle. Now, women who are using chemical contraceptives don't have a fertile phase of their cycle. That's obliterated by the hormonal contraceptives. But I was talking about this once in Kansas, that males are much more attracted to females when they have a fertile cycle. He comes up after me, he says, "Listen, girl," he said, "you don't need to tell this to people in Kansas." He said, "We're farmers." He said, "We know that when there's a bull, when there's a cow who's going through a fertile cycle, and there's a bull that's a mile away. He said, if there's 3 fences in between, he'll get there. See, this guy didn't quite make it. All right. Okay. All right. Now, this, ladies, listen to this carefully. Listen to this carefully. They did this test where they had all these supermodels who, pictures of supermodels and human males in a room. And they showed them the pictures of the supermodels and asked them to rate them for their attractiveness. Very attractive, very attractive, very attractive. Then they showed a group of ordinary-looking women, but put something in the room that was soaked in female fertile hormones. All right. Now, it's something that you actually perceive through your olfactory nerves, but they don't have an odor. They're odorless, but you perceive them through your olfactory nerves. And they rated those women more attractive than the supermodels. Right? It says they say female chemical messengers known as pheromones may help dupe men into thinking plain women are more attractive and beautiful women are less attractive than they actually are. Pheromones, the colorless, odorless chemical signals given off by the body, are thought to affect behavior in both animals and humans at a subconscious level. Women are paying mountains of money to get their hair streaked and these clothes and the makeup and everything, and they're using chemical contraceptive hormones to suppress their fertility, which is a natural attraction to men. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Women also choose different men when they're on the pill because their normal hormones aren't there. And they did this test mentioned in Lionel Tiger's book. And they would have males wear a T-shirt for a day, and they rated these men somehow for their evolutionary desirability. Right? There were those kind of losers on this end and aggressive, healthy men on this end. Couch potatoes down here, and up there. And then they had 2 groups of females, one using contraception, one not. And at the end of the day, women are very much attracted to men through our sense of smell. And the women would smell these T-shirts. And the women who were not contracepting chose the evolutionarily high men as the ones they'd like to meet and mate with. And the contraceptors chose the men lower on the scale. I've had mothers come up after me and say, well, that explains my daughter, her choices. That's why she's with those losers, all right? And other women will come up and say, that explains why my wonderful young son is not getting women, the dates, because he's wonderful and they're all contracepting and they can't perceive that about him. All right. All right, lots of women use the pill. 98% of women in the U.S. from the ages of 15 to 44 have used some type of contraception. 82 the pill, 92 the condom, 17 Depo-Provera, 21% use female sterilization, 13% use male sterilization, and 2% have used NFP. Most people who have been sexually active in the United States have used contraceptives. Most of them have used hormonal contraceptives, and most of them use those hormonal contraceptives in their courtship period of life, right, and make bad decisions. The divorce rate has absolutely paralleled the increased use of contraception. Contraception came on the scene in 1960, so you'd say the divorce rate was 9.2%. By the year 1980 or so, every woman who wanted contraception in the United States was using it. The divorce rate was then at 22.6%, right? In a short 20-year period, the divorce rate more than doubled in the United States. It's never done that in any period of history. The divorce rate doubled. There are many factors in that, but if anybody doesn't think contraception was a major factor, I don't know how you reason, all right? Divorce is absolutely lethal for children, right? There's a new book out by a woman named Lila Miller called Primal Loss, and she's getting testimonies from adult people who were raised in divorced households and how it's still with them. That pain is enormous their whole life long. It never goes away. And parents say things, oh, well, the children are resilient. The children will be able to put up with it. But their world is shattered. Their world is shattered, and it's shattered possibly in some respect for the rest of their life. So those who get married had better be sure that they're going to last. They're going to do everything they possibly can to make this marriage last for the sake of their children, if not for their sake. How does it affect the culture? Again, badly. It introduced in our culture what we can call casual recreational sex. This young man says, nice to meet you. Would you like to have dinner, go to a movie, and then have sex? And she says, sure, why not? All right. it's not that formal in our culture. In college, the kids go off to college, they go to parties, they have too much to drink, they start making out, they go into a room with a flat surface and have sex and have nothing to do with each other after that. They hook up, right? There's an incredible movie that I recommend people see and watch with their teenager called The Dating Project. And it's a movie about a college professor who requires that her students go on a date. And they have to ask the person out by telephone or in person. It's only for an hour. They can't spend more than $10, and they have to spend the hour talking to each other. They've never done anything like that. Most of them have hooked up. Most of them had sex. They said having sex a lot's easier than talking to someone, right? Especially if you're drunk, right? Not much talking going on, right? But and these kids were thrilled. They had so much fun. They got to know somebody, and somebody got to know them just a little bit. No pressure to have sex. You weren't supposed to have sex. You did a little hug. That's all you were allowed, all right? Delay in sexual activity leads to greater marital stability. I think I'm going to skip to this one. The number of lifetime non-marital partners. If a woman gets married and has had 0 sexual partners, she has an 80% chance of having a longer lasting marriage. If she's had 1 sexual partner before marriage, that drops to 50% to having a long-lasting marriage. And then it just goes down and down and down. The more sexual partners before marriage is an absolutely good predictor of getting divorced, right? Our culture now talks about accidental pregnancy, which, there is no such thing, right? You step on a gas pedal of a car and it goes forward. You don't say, oh, how did that happen, all right? We know the cause and we know the effect, right? So when someone gets pregnant through sexual intercourse, there should be no, oh, how did that happen? All right, we know the cause and we know the effect. It actually means something's gone right, not that something's gone wrong when you have sexual intercourse. I want to write in a Sharpie on every post-puberty kid's head, sex leads to babies, all right? So let's keep this in mind all the time. Sex leads to babies. Whether you're using a contraception or not, sex leads to babies. Contraceptives fail. The condom 18% of the time. Birth control pills 9% of the time. That's a lot, right? Nobody's getting on a plane that crashes 9% of the time, I'm assuming, right? All right, unwed pregnancies, 42% of the babies born in the United States are now born to single mothers. 42%. Unbelievable. Those kids have so many strikes against them before they're even out of the chute, as they say. Contraception affects a person's relation. How does it affect a person's relationship with God? Badly, all right? This is from Humanae Vitae. The church can only conduct herself as did the divine Redeemer. She knows man's kind weakness. She has compassion on the multitude, and she forgives their sins. She cannot, however, do otherwise than to teach the law, which is proper to human life restored to its original truth and guided by the Spirit of God. The teaching of the church about the proper spacing of children is a promulgation of the divine law itself. This isn't something that the church made up. It said God has a plan for sexuality. Those having contraceptive sex are saying with their bodies, I want to have sex with you. We see these 2 sensuous people, blank faces, barely know each other, having sex. It means nothing. Someone who says to another person, as I said earlier, I want you to be the mother or father of my children, that's what a non-contraceptive act of sexual intercourse always says. The body is saying, I want to have a lifetime relationship with you. I am open to a lifetime relationship to you. So obviously sex belongs within marriage. And babies themselves are bonding. They have immortal souls. And when you have a baby, the 2 of you become one. 23 of his chromosomes, 23 of your chromosomes, 46 chromosomes. A new human being who would not have existed for the fact that you 2 expressed your love for each other. I'm trying to stop saying the phrase, I haven't succeeded having sexual intercourse. I want to go back to that phrase, making love. Making love. Having sexual intercourse is just a raw physical activity. Making love is an act of complete self-giving. I give myself to you like I give myself to no one else. To no one else. And with you, I'm open to having children. I don't want to have children with anybody else. just you. So making love and making children are very closely bound together. Right? Ah, yes, my translation. Previous translations, first line of Humanae Vitae. God has entrusted to spouses the very serious duty of transmitting human life. My superior translation says, God has entrusted to spouses the extremely important mission of transmitting human life, by which they offer a service to God. Very serious duty sounds like paying your taxes, right? It's not an attractive thing. I have a very serious duty I need to perform. That's making love, all right? So it's an extremely important mission of transmitting human life. Again, you're in this with God. The act of sexual intercourse is an act ordained by God. It's not a nasty thing. It's not a pornographic thing. It's a beautiful, sacred thing that God has given human beings to make love and make babies. The phrase there in Latin is gravissimum munus. Ah, you Latinists, now you're so happy. The munus, the word munus means gift, role, or task. Christ has the threefold munus of being priest, prophet, and king. The Pope has the munus of infallibility. Mary has the munus of being the mother of God. And spouses have the munus of transmitting life. It's the job of spouses, just like being priest, prophet, and king is the job or gift or mission of Christ. All right? We've looked at that. I'm repeating myself. All right. Spouses have the munus of transmitting human life. There's nothing more glorious for spouses than to have a baby. Their whole life changes. Whole life changes. They now have something that they're in it together in some huge way. Those who are infertile suffer a huge cross, huge cross. They can adopt children and be pro-life in many, many ways. But it's very natural for couples to want children. And then all of a sudden it becomes many children. And then you see your legacy. That's my family. Many years ago, I'm the one with the shades on because I'm the coolest one in the whole group. All right. Well, it's going to be a great day. I'm delighted to be here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. God bless you.